Hello and welcome. These are the main camera setups that I use to capture events, and today I'm going to share with you exactly how I do that. Let's take a look. My name is Cree, and on this channel, I talk about tech with context. Now, I'm going to share with you how I capture events. Now, this isn't if I'm live streaming an event today. I have created a video that gives you the entire breakdown of how I live stream any type of an event. I'll place a link to that video down in the description. But today what I'll do is I'll step you through the typical camera setups that I use, how I use them. I'm also going to talk about audio, video, and lighting specifically, and then I'm going to just go over some mounting options for your cameras, especially at a large size event where you might be there for a long period of time. So with that said, let's start with the camera setup breakdown. Now, these are completely rigged out. I'm not going to go into the details of these rigs, but I'm probably going to be creating a video in the near future that will show you all of the details of how I set these up. But let's focus on how I approach an event and what I want to capture while I'm on site. So in this case, I have two different setups. One is a wide angle. I want to be able to capture a wide angle at the event to show the audience and to really give the viewer the feeling that they're at an event. And then the other camera option that I bring is one with a zoom lens where I can hone in on whoever is being highlighted at the time. So that might be the speaker or the workshop leader or someone like that. I can zoom in wherever I am. I can do this from far away, and I can capture exactly what I need. So the other thing about having multiple camera angles is that one is typically stationary, which is my setup. The wide angle is typically stationary. And then I'm walking around with this camera. So if I'm walking around and I'm showing that, it's nice to be able to cut back and forth from a wide angle to a more narrowed in viewpoint. And so that's what I run with. Now, sometimes I can get away with doing this with only myself, but I ideally like to have at least one person per camera so that they can keep an eye on everything. Also, just from a safety perspective, this gear's expensive, and if somebody trips and the camera falls or something like that, well, that's a really bad day. So that's kind of what I go with here. But the point is I always show up with at least two cameras to capture any event. All right, now this smaller size camera is one of the camera angles that I use. Now, it is small in size. You might think that this is the one that I run around with. It's not. It has a wide angle lens on it. The lens is smaller in size. Now, when I'm capturing an event, I want everything and everyone to be in focus. I don't care about having a blurry background in this case. So I actually use the 16 to 35 f4 to capture a wide angle at an event. And on the back here, you see a V-mount battery. I do have a top handle. This is the FX3 that I'm using today. And then I also have some sort of external audio that I am using to capture audio at the event. And I use that to sync files in post, but more importantly, I also use this microphone to capture the sound that the audience makes during an event. I don't know if you've ever watched a video where somebody's speaking in front of a room and all you hear is their audio. You can't hear the audience or the clapping or the laughter. It really takes a lot of the positivity and the feeling of an event out of a video if you do that. So I like to capture everything. This is what I typically use for an extended period of time. I am going to show you later on when I show you mounting options how I capture the video files externally, especially for a very long event. I can only record for as long as my SD cards have space and as long as this V-mount battery has power. But this will give me 4 to 6 hours, depending if I'm shooting 4K or 1080. And what I do is I set this camera up in a corner and I just get a nice wide view of everybody at the event. This camera is typically stationary. It stays in one place. I have it at 16 millimeters. And the other key thing that I do with this camera is I don't use autofocus. I focus it and then I put the lens in manual focus, and then that way if people are walking around, it's not randomly picking up faces and focusing on people in the audience. I want to just get a nice wide focus area. I just lock the camera in, I hit record, and that's pretty much all that this camera does the entire event. I'm going to move this camera out of the way here for a minute, and I am going to show you a mounting option that I use for that wide angle camera that I use for events, but I want to focus in on this one. This camera is a beast, and I'm sure you've seen larger rigs for events, but I'm just going to give you the quick rundown. I'm using an FX3 in a cage. I have this all powered with AV mount battery. I'm using the 35 to 150. I love this lens for events. Couple of different manufacturers use this focal length. It shoots all the way down to a 2.0, so I do care about a blurry background sometimes when I am walking around with this camera. I do have an external monitor, and if you notice here on the side, I also have an extra handle over here on the side. Now, like I mentioned, this is heavy. There are heavier rigs out there. This is the lightest I can get this, and the main reason is because when I'm carrying this around all day long, it gets heavy. So anytime I can have a handle somewhere on this rig, I'm going to have it. And then you'll notice I also have an external microphone on this camera. I also have a monitor up top here so that I can clearly see and make sure that whoever I'm focusing in on is actually in focus. And this is the general setup that I use for walking around at an event. So one of the most difficult things to capture at an event is audio. Now, I did go over how I capture audio on that wide angle camera setup, but let's take a closer look at the camera that I walk around with when I'm capturing an event. And you'll notice I'm using an FX3. If you have an FX30, you also have this option. This has a top handle. Audio is important because when I'm capturing this, I'm actually baking that audio directly into my video file. And it just makes post-production life a whole lot easier. So you notice I do have one external microphone that's capturing the audio of the audience and the general environment. It's something that I enjoy capturing for my events. But what I'm also doing is I have a wireless microphone. I don't know if you can see it up top here. There it is. That's the receiver. This is the transmitter. And on the other side of this camera, I have two inputs going into this top handle on the camera. I do have an alternative. If you don't have a top handle, I'll show you what that looks like here in a moment. But the idea is that you have two channels on your camera, at least two channels, I should say, on your camera if you have an audio input. You have a left channel and a right channel. Now, if you're just recording with your camera regularly, you're capturing audio on both of those channels, and left and right mean left and right ear. So in this case, what I do is I capture this kind of environmental audio on one microphone. I capture that in, let's say, the left channel. And then in the right channel, I'm going to attach this wireless microphone to the speaker or the person that I'm capturing that day, so that when they're speaking, I get clear audio, and they're just wearing this the entire day, and this audio is being baked into that video footage. When it comes to using these wireless microphone systems, these are nice because they also record internally. So not only am I capturing the signal from this microphone and baking it directly into my video file, but if something happens to that signal along the way, there's a recording right here that I can capture and use in post or in my edit if I want to. Now, when it comes to combining all this audio in your edit, all you have to do is take that left and right channel and combine it. You want to make sure you do that in your edit when you're capturing in this way. Now, if you don't have a top handle, what you can also do is pick up one of these cables. It is an audio split cable. This goes into your camera, and then this is your left channel, this is your right channel. So you would plug this, into the back of, let's say, a shotgun mic. This would actually plug directly into your wireless microphone receiver, and then you just mount this directly on your camera. There are little mounts like this, so you can have your shotgun mic on one side and you can have your receiver on the other. But there are different ways to mount these items. So if you don't have a top handle, then you can go ahead and just grab one of those split cables and it accomplishes the same thing. Now, the reason why I go with this setup is because you can capture audio from the main podium at an event. You can work with the audio team on site, but I've just found it's a whole lot easier to walk in and just be able to manage your own audio. Anytime you add an additional layer to your workflow, there's just more of a chance for things to go wrong. And if something goes wrong with the audio board, I'm not in charge of that while I'm on site. So I would rather just walk in with my own audio if I need to. Now, this microphone is going directly to the speaker. If you want to capture audio from the audience or anything like that, I just use an additional wireless microphone. I do have a system where I have one receiver and two transmitters, which is two microphones, and I just put it on a little microphone stand so you can hand that around, and while people are speaking, it's going to collect that audio, and you have that baked in to your camera, and then it's also saved onto that transmitter. So that's really nice. I can't emphasize enough, find an audio setup that works best for you. This is what works best for me. I've been able to capture all the audio I need to satisfy the requirements of whatever client I'm working with at the time. They're always mic'd up. I'm always capturing their audio. And again, you can only record for as long as the battery life lasts on these devices. So be sure to have backups and, give this a try. This might be something that works for you when you're capturing events as well. Now, capturing audio can be a challenge at events, but file storage is also a challenge. Now, it all depends on what you decide to shoot in. If I am shooting a long event, depending on the amount of space I have on my SD cards, the choice is, do I shoot in 4K or do I shoot in 1080? And with these cameras nowadays, 1080 is just fine. You can always create a 4K timeline in whatever editing software you're using if you're really concerned about uploading 4K to a space like YouTube or something like that. But in most cases, especially for these longer files, 1080 is going to be just fine. It's going to give you all the space that you need on your SD cards. But if you do need to shoot 4K, you definitely want to make sure that you bring extra SD cards, that you have a plan in place so that you have one camera running while you're changing out SD cards on the other, and you're staggering the change out of those SD cards. The other option is to capture your video files externally. I use the Atomos Ninja 5. I'm going to show you this device a little bit later when I show you one of the mounting options I use. But make sure that you have a plan in place to capture and have the space available to capture all those video files. They do get large very fast, especially if you're shooting something all day long. So make sure that you have a plan in place for that. And now let's talk about lighting. So when it comes to lighting, what I'll typically do is just reach out to whoever the event coordinator is and just make sure that they have some sort of lighting set up to capture the speaker on stage, or if there's a podium or something like that, there is light that's shining in that general direction. And typically that's enough. So at events, I will set up lighting if there is a step and repeat type of a situation that I need to capture, or if there's an area where I can set up lighting to capture testimonials. But for all intents and purposes, for the most part, especially the cameras nowadays, they do handle low light very well. And I just kind of go with the flow, run with what I have, and do the best that I can. Now, when it comes to mounting, in these two different scenarios, this is the camera that I walk around with. I have attached a side handle onto the cage here. This just gives me a little more stability and makes carrying and holding this camera a little more comfortable. Remember, you're going to be holding this camera for a very long period of time, so it doesn't matter how light it is, it gets heavy after a while. Also, when you're setting it down, you want to make sure that it's not too tippy, it's not going to tip over. I normally have a tripod or something sitting in the corner of the room where I can place this camera on anytime that I need a break. Now, when it comes to the wide angle and choosing a tripod, you want to be able to extend this tripod as tall as possible. So remember, you're shooting over an audience typically. So this tripod is very tall. It can shoot over an audience that's sitting, or even if people are standing and using the restroom, it's not going to hinder the view that I'm trying to capture. You also want to have a nice fluid head. This just makes it easy to move the camera around in a nice, comfortable, easy way. And it just makes the motion of the camera a lot simpler and easier to use. Nice big knobs over here to tighten everything while you're using it. And it just makes things more comfortable. Now the big thing is, if you notice on this camera, I have this monitor mounted on the top, and that's because I'm holding this camera down by my waist most of the time. In this case, because this camera is going to be so tall, what I do is I actually use a friction arm and I mount an external monitor down low. So you can see right here that no matter how tall I make this camera, I'm still going to be able to view the monitor, make sure that everything's in focus, and that I'm capturing everything appropriately. So in this case, this monitor can be powered by this V-mount battery. So I'll just use a cable, I'll plug that cable right into this V-mount battery to power this monitor. And then I also run an HDMI cable into the HDMI input on the camera so that I can capture this right here. Now, in this case, if you remember when I was speaking about file storage and file sizes, this is an Atomos Ninja 5. You can also record externally to this monitor. Now again, depending on the drive size you have on here, I have 1 terabyte on here, and whatever, if you're shooting in 4K or 1080, then just like anything else, this is only going to last as long as the amount of storage and the amount of power you have, but it will give you more opportunity to capture larger file sizes than a typical SD or CF Express cards will do. So this is definitely an option. All right, there you have it. These are the camera setups that I use to capture events, also the considerations that I make when capturing video, audio, and lighting for any type of an event. If you like this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up. And yeah, I ask you to subscribe before you head out. I put out weekly videos like this where I go over the tech I use for video production and just break it down so that you can see exactly how I use it. Thanks so much, as always, for tuning in, and I'll see you again in the next video.